I've been wandering, gone too far, but the road was rough to get back where you are. And the sun went down, it never seemed to rise. But now you're here, with the light shining in your eyes. Now I know I can't lose as long as you follow. I'm going to win, I'm going to beg, steal, or borrow, as long as you follow. My favorite Fleetwood Mac song, written by the unsung hero, no pun intended, of Fleetwood Mac, Christine McVie. Sad, sad, sad that she's gone, and we mourn the passing. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. Christine McVie's maiden name is perfect. I'm not saying that the maiden name she had was a perfect representation. Maybe it was. I'm saying it literally was perfect. Her name was Christine Perfect. Her dad was a concert violinist. Her mom was a psychic medium. Whoa, there's a combination for you. It's like you could get that old Stradivarius and hand it to mom, and she could lay hands on it and tell you its story. Reminds me of a book I've talked about on the show before, which is The Collector by Tibor Fischer. And that's a wonderful and weird novel by a really terrific writer, Tibor Fischer. And The Collector is a story written in the first person from the perspective of a piece of pottery. The bowl with soul. I've talked about this before. If you're a new listener, maybe you haven't heard me talk about Tibor Fischer's The Collector. But it's written by a bull, an ancient piece of pottery, who throughout the course of a modern day narrative goes back in time to talk about some of his collectors. Its collectors, I suppose. I think pottery is probably gender neutral. You get the sense that this is a masculine bull, probably because it's a male writer. Are you allowed to say somebody's male anymore? Like, I don't even know where the line is. Really funny book, really weird book, and I loved it. The Collector. So maybe Christine Perfect's father, the violinist, and his wife, the medium, could actually divine stories from his violins. I don't know. But she was born Christine Perfect. And that got me thinking about surnames, because a lot of the surnames we had, apparently, surnames were not a thing in the English language in England until the year 1066 and beyond. Now, check your history books, kids. Pop quiz. What event is recognized? For what reason do we recognize the year 1066? Anybody? Anybody out there? Battle of Hastings! Yes, the Battle of Hastings, 1066. I'm not going to give you the whole history of the Battle of Hastings here, but as so often happened in the course of monarchies, a king died, leaving no clear heir to the throne of England, and then a bunch of people who felt as though they were the rightful heir, or at least an opportunistic one, to that throne, started gathering their armies and fighting each other, one of whom was William the Conqueror of Normandy, the north of France, who sailed across the English Channel to fight at the moment, King Harold, and at the Battle of Hastings defeated Harold's army and killed Harold himself, and William the Conqueror became King of England. And apparently it was at that point that the use of surnames came into vogue, because William brought across names including Robert, Richard, Henri, Robert, Richard, Henry, and they became so popular that everybody was Robert, Richard, or Henry. And so you're trying to refer to somebody, and it's like, get on up to Robert's place, and we'll get a duck for dinner, or something like that. With Robert, there's 30 of them in the village. Which one do you mean? So they began to adopt surnames, all right? Surnames were derived from a variety of different things. You might draw a surname from the place where you live. So we live at the bottom of the hill, so our surname is Hill. Or our surname is Green, because we live on the village green. So I'm Robert Green and you're Robert Hill. Ah, gotcha. And I'm Robert whatever. Or sometimes you would derive a surname from your occupation. So you get somebody whose name is Farmer, or whose name is Baker, or whose name is Smith, or whose name is Fisher, or perhaps whose name is Taylor. I'm Robert. Which Robert are you? Well, I'm Robert the Fisher. Oh, you catch the fish. Yes, Robert Fisher you are. As opposed to Robert Miller, who's over there milling the wheat. Know what I mean? And sometimes you would derive a surname from some characteristic about you. I'm going up to Robert's place. Which Robert? The big one or the little one? Oh, Robert Little. The little Robert. Oh, Robert Little. Robert Short. You know what I mean? Or that one with the dark complexion. Oh, Robert Brown. Yes, Robert Brown, not Robert White. Robert Brown. Oh, let's get up to Robert Brown's place because Henry Fisher is coming over with the catch of the day. Not Henry Baker. No, Henry Baker's coming too because he made some bread. Know what I mean? And so it brings up the question of Christine Perfect. I mean, people, I think, presumably gave themselves surnames. So what was going on in Christine's ancestry where they decided, well, we're perfect? Seems just a trifle arrogant. Hello, we're the perfects. Whoa, everybody watch out, the perfects are coming. Make sure that Richard Baker has some really nice croissants for the perfects because, man, apparently the surname Perfect derives from perhaps the Middle English word parfait, meaning fully trained or well-versed, like, say, a concert violinist. Or perhaps from the French word parfait or parfait, meaning completed. So, Christine McVie, a thoroughly accomplished musician, singer, songwriter, also studied sculpture, by the way, multi-talented artist. Apparently she is, or was, at a certain point, the latest in a long line of well-trained folks who describe themselves as the parfaits, or the parfaits, or the perfects. And I thought for a long time that my surname, Huff, was English, and because there are English Huffs, and you will see it spelled H-O-U-G-H, and I think that particular surname in English derives from, maybe I think Huff was a word for a hill, something like that, or some sort of geographic feature. In Old English or Middle English, I'm not sure. I briefly studied Old English in university, thought that would be a cool thing to do, and I signed up for the Old English course, and I lasted maybe 3 lectures because it was so much based on grammar, and I do not grammar well. Grammar is a calculation. I'm not a math guy. You know what I mean? Now, I recognize good grammar and poor grammar when I see, hear, and read it. I have that ability, but I cannot usually define for you why it's good or bad grammar. I can't give you the participles. You know what I mean? Can't do that for you. It becomes a problem as well in my somewhat lagging lately study of Deutsch, because a form of a word will depend on its tense or whether it's the accusative or whatever. And it's like my brain just doesn't jive to that. My brain does not jive to some of this stuff. I'm an artist. I recognize it when I hear it. I can't tell you why. Old English became a problem for me because so many of the words, how they are said, how they are used, depended on understanding the verb tenses, and I was just not great at getting my head around that. So I dropped Old English, which means I never encountered the Old or Middle English word parfait, which became the basis for the name Perfect. But of course, my name, Huff, is not English at all. If you've listened to the podcast, you know I discovered that my surname actually has Dutch origins. It was initially Brinkerhoff, came from somewhere in the Netherlands where I've visited, and I've done this before. You can go back and hear it. I believe the episode was called Going Dutch. Brinkerhoff, somebody either left the Netherlands or was forced out of the Netherlands or just fled, changed the name to Hoff, arrived in America. Eventually, that was altered to Huff, and here we are. So I'm not even English. And, you know, I would assume the origins of Dutch surnames are very similar, like they probably come from some logical thing. Ain't going into that. I'm just saying Christine McVie died. And I don't really go in, generally speaking, for the celebrity death thing. I feel it sometimes. You know, somebody passes away. You acknowledge to yourself that that person or that person's art or legacy or contribution had some effect on your life. You do a little salute and you move on. The Christine McVie thing, it actually really hit me. And I really love Fleetwood Mac. I didn't realize until probably the last 10 years or so just how much I really love Fleetwood Mac, but I do. And I was so not dismissive, but I was not acknowledging enough of Christine McVie and who she was and how she sang and what she wrote and what a contribution she made. You know, Stevie Nicks gets all of the attention. Stevie Nicks is 5'1". That is not a judgment. That's just an observation that I discovered in my travels. Because Stevie Nicks is a superstar of superstars. She is an icon. And we have it in our head that our icons are giants. And then I find out that Stevie Nicks is 5'1". Just a tiny minute of a thing. And she is wonderful. Do not take this as in some way condescending or dismissive of Stevie Nicks. It's just an observation. It's weird. Guess what? Celebrities are just people too. And Angus Young is 5'2". That's why that Gibson guitar looks like a freaking cello in his arms. Again, not a judgment, just an observation. I freaking love Stevie Nicks. We all freaking love Stevie Nicks, and that's the point. She got so much of the attention, and of course she did. She was up front. She was kind of the face of the band, really. And Christine McVie was, I don't know if relegated is the right word. Christine McVie was somewhat pushed to the back behind her keyboards, whatever. And maybe that was a choice of hers. You know, at a certain point, she left Fleetwood Mac in the 90s. Like, I'm done. I'm done being in the public eye. I'm done being in the spotlight. And, you know, it's hard enough being in a band. Being in that band, what a freaking gong show Fleetwood Mac was. My goodness. And, you know, the Rumors album, the relationships, all the weird stuff. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, Christine and John McVie, and then Mick Fleetwood and Stevie had a thing. And then it was just like a gong show, a flying circus. And I suspect at a certain point, Christine McVie had had enough of being in the circus and had had enough of being in the circus that surrounded the circus. Look, Fleetwood Mac, one of the biggest, most popular, most successful bands in the history of music. Top 10, folks. Top 10 in terms of sheer album sales, Rumors alone, and presence, and iconography, and as being part of the public consciousness, Fleetwood Mac, it does not get a lot bigger, okay? There's a circus that surrounds that, especially when it's as tabloid as that band was. Addictions, relationships, affairs, breakups. I'm going to write a hit song that's about you, Lindsey Buckingham, and you're going to have to play it. It's a circus. I can imagine wanting to be out of that, but I think Christine McVie, up to a point, might have been kind of a private person. I did not know her personally. We have a lot of mutuals, but we never actually met. Maybe she was a bit private, and maybe because of that, she was okay with being somewhat in the background to Stevie Nicks. I don't know. But what happened was somebody like me comes along, and I'm an idiot, and I just see Stevie Nicks, and I think to myself, okay, there's this other girl, Christine. She's in the band too, but this thing is really about Stevie. And you focus on that. And then you realize, well, actually, my favorite Fleetwood Mac song is As Long As You Follow. And that's not Stevie Nicks. And there's Little Lies. And there's Don't Stop. And there's Over My Head. And there's You Make Lovin' Fun, which is not my favorite Fleetwood Mac song, but it's huge. And it's like, wait a minute. Christine McVie wrote these songs. Christine McVie, you know, when you hear her sing, you're like, oh, there's something happening there. A very distinct voice from Stevie. It's one of the reasons that bands like that work, is that the voices are different, but they work well together, you know? And then I just began to realize I have been undervaluing and underappreciating Christine McVie in a criminal kind of way. And then I developed this new appreciation. I developed this new affection. I developed, for me, this new kind of connection to Christine McVie, and she became the unsung hero to me. But my goodness, how that woman could sing and how she could write. And As Long As You Follow, there's just something magical about that song. There was something magical about Christine McVie, and so it hit me. I think she was, for me, representative of a kind of growth, representative of a kind of appreciation, you know, where I looked past the superstar stuff, the Stevie Nicks stuff, deeper into the songwriting, deeper into the unsung hero that was Christine McVie. And that affection comes up in the announcement that she passed away at 79. What a life she had. What a contribution she made musically. And it made me sad, and it still does, that Christine McVie passed away. And, well, let's just listen to As Long As You Follow. Let's listen to some of her music and appreciate the legacy she left, man. The sculptor, Christine Perfect. I'm recording this on Wednesday morning. I'm recording this on release day. And this is the third go at it. So it's going to be a short episode because I'm way behind in getting it out. I wasn't sure I was even going to be able to do it. You know, you've heard me talk lately about struggling a little bit at times to just kind of get in the zone. And that's partly a function of self-doubt. That's partly a function of just being tired, I think. A little bit of burnout. We're coming to that time of the year when it's time to just step back and relax a little bit. I've had trouble getting into the zone. That's been a bit frustrating, but I'm back and I'm trying. Because I just felt like I wanted to take one more shot. You know, I did another completely produced episode that I will not release because trying this now, I really question myself. Still 122 episodes in, I still question what on earth I'm doing here. And there are times when that question overwhelms me. You know, it's like, no, this isn't the way you do it. Is this the way you do it? I don't trust my own intuition on this. What do I want to do? What does anybody want me to do? Why do I do this anyway? I get wrapped up in that sometimes, and it just kind of spirals me. And then, you know, you sit down to the microphone, you're in the wrong headspace, and it doesn't work. And if you're already questioning yourself, you really kind of undercut your confidence when you sit down to do it, and it collapses on you. So I hope what I'm doing here becomes presentable and provides, if nothing else, a friendly voice and some entertainment for you. And if that doesn't, there's some new music that perhaps will. And I got to point right away to the new single by Steel Panther, 1987. And this song it's really making people teary. If you can imagine, you know, Steel Panther, if they make you teary, Usually, it's because you're listening to this going, how are they getting away with this? Wait a minute. A band is writing lyrics like this, and it's working for them, and then you begin to cry for all humanity. Unless you've got a soul, and the soul has a sense of humor. So sometimes they'll make you cry with laughter. World needs laughter, kids. World needs laughter today. What the world needs now is love, sweet love, and a bit of laughter, and Steel Panther provides that. Okay, but this song, 1987, in its own curious Steel Panther way, is kind of a nice nostalgia trip. It's about, as you might guess, the year 1987. And if you were around in 87, man, you know what it was like. Check these lyrics. Appetite for destruction blowing us all away. Poison looking so damn good, I wondered if I was gay. Ha! Didn't we all? I've talked about this before. The cover of Look What the Cat Dragged In. You picked that up and you went, wow! These are either really super hot chicks or I'm not quite sure what. And this was the peak of the lipstick, the eyeliner, the rouge that they were wearing, you know, the big teased up platinum blonde hair. These are either really hot porn stars or I'm not quite sure what I'm dealing with, but the question was raised right away. Are these girls? And if so, how fine are they? And if they're not, what's going on right now? Poison looking so damn good, I wondered if I was gay. Whitesnake making us bang our heads in the still of the frickin' night. Coverdale banging Tawny Kitaen, and the world all felt just right. Chorus! 1987, I never want to leave you. When you told me I was in my prime, why didn't I believe you? And the music scene will never be the same. But I didn't realize that things could get this lame. That's Steel Panther actually tugging at the heartstrings. Kids, this is as sentimental and heartfelt as it gets with the band that brought you Gold Digging Whore and Glory Hole. You know what I mean? But it's funny watching the reaction to this song online because people are like, yes! I remember Whitesnake, the self-titled album, and Still of the Night. And Here I Go Again, Is This Love? I think they were all on that record. And people looking wistfully, longingly back at the way things were in 1987. We have this illusion, I guess. In retrospect is full of illusions. And we have this illusion that 1987 was, in some senses, I suppose it was a golden age. I mean, there was stuff going on that was not cool, all right? There was the Cold War. You know, there was Reaganomics. There was stuff going on that was not great. But we look back at it, a lot of us, that was our youth. I was 14 in 1987. I do not like to look back at myself in 1987. But, the era, the hair metal thing, the glam metal thing was at its peak. This sort of sex, drugs, rock and roll. It was nothing but a good time, man. It was nothing but a good time in those days. And that's what the rock music scene was about. It was about rebellion within limits. It was about a middle finger to authority. It was about kids. It was about the mall. It was about the arcade. It was just what seems to us to be a more innocent time. And maybe it was and maybe it wasn't. Every era has its own pressures. Every era has its own things that were not so great about it, man. And there are people who lived that youth who did not enjoy it one bit. I am not glossing over that. But a lot of people hearing this song are thinking back to when they went to the Warrant concert or the Poison show. You know what I mean? Appetite for Destruction came out. Guns N' Roses was starting to happen. And it's just a wistful, in their weird kind of brazen way, a wistful look back from Steel Panther at how it used to be. And there's references now to, we didn't have YouTube and we didn't have this stupid Snapchat and all this social media crap. You had friends. You had friends and you saw them every day. And the kids these days, will never understand what it's like to play an instrument and be in a band. Growing out our hair, getting high with girls, cranking scorpions and priests, everyone in leather, there was never a doubt in any of our minds that pretty soon Dave and Eddie were getting back together. 1987, where did we go astray? Back then, the friends we had were real and we saw them every day. And no one once got canceled for the things that they say. 1987 will forever be the year when guys wore more lipstick than girls and no one seemed to care. And this is the real heart tug right here, okay? And the music that we worshipped will live on, even after all our heavy metal heroes are gone. Don't you feel that? Don't you feel that? Maybe it's the fact that this era, the people who grew up in this era, people who were teenagers, young adults in the 80s, I mean, we're sneaking up on 40 years later. They're becoming 50-year-olds. They're becoming 60-year-olds. They're becoming people who are beginning to recognize their own mortality. What do you do when you recognize your own mortality? You begin to look back. And hopefully you don't begin to look back and see a whole lot of wasted time. It's a dangerous thing, man. But this song is actually doing the rounds. This song is actually stirring up emotion among people. Steel Panther is stirring up emotion among people. Wistful looks back at their youth and how it used to be. It's a perpetual sunshine, kids. It's a perpetual summer. Listening to Look What the Cat Dragged In at the beach. And seeing beside you down the beach, sunning themselves on towels, a few pretty girls that you've never seen before. And you want nothing more than to have the courage with your mullet and your skinny, glowingly white body to march over there and strike up a conversation and maybe find that summer romance. But you don't do it because you are a spindly goofball like me, and what girl would be interested anyways? But that's what it brings back. It harkens back to these endless summers, which as an adult you realize were not so endless at all and went by in a freaking flash. But it takes you wistfully back to what I suspect is an idealized 1987. But that was a big year for music, man. 1987 was freaking huge, all right? You had Appetite for Destruction, huge. I mean, that was scene changing, all right? Appetite for Destruction was a sea change in the music world. Now, Guns N' Roses looked pretty glam when they came out. You cannot deny that. Axl with the teased up hair and all that stuff. But even in 1987, the music was getting to be pretty produced, man. It was becoming, the metal thing was becoming kind of a machine. And then right off the streets of Hollywood came Guns N' Roses with legit street credentials, all right? Now, they had kind of a glam look, but there was a sound happening here that was not the Hollywood glam sound. It was more raw. It was more kind of real. It was the beginning of what they began to, a subgenre that they began to call sleaze. Sleaze rock, sleaze metal. And then LA Guns happened and Faster Pussycat happened. There's kind of this sleaze, and it was just more raw, more kind of real. And I mean, Appetite for Destruction, through a course of being great and Slash being iconic and Axl being iconic, right off the bat, these guys were mega stars. But they did it smart, all right? They did it smart. They did it in an era that was really visual, all right? That was the 80s. That was the MTV era. You needed to be visual. It's why those bands looked the way they did. And it's why it was so colorful, and it's why the light shows, and it's why the pyro and all that stuff. It was visual, okay? Guns N' Roses came along, and they had this crazy guitar legend in the making called Slash. And what did they do? He got the top hat on. He's got the sheepdog curls and the sunglasses. A very iconic style choice, an iconic look. And then Axl with this wild voice. just this wild voice, like a 5-octave range, something like that. Axl Rose was no joke, man. And the combination of those two people with this music that had just a different sound, it had a more real thing going. You know, the knock on glam metal, particularly by the end, is that it seemed to become formulaic, produced, commercialized, very, very produced. And here was an antidote to that within the spectrum. Guns N' Roses was more raw. You had Sweet Child of Mine. You had Welcome to the Jungle. There was an authenticity, I guess, in the music that really registered even then. This was a sea change for the music scene, man. And then Guns N' Roses went on to rule the world for a handful of years there. I mean, GNR was the thing. And the imitators came out, and then grunge happened, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that was 1987. The Whitesnake record that I already mentioned was huge. Aerosmith released Permanent Vacation. Alice Cooper released Raise Your Fist and Yell, Freedom! There was a great record by a band called Bonfire. One of my favorite, actually, probably a top 10 glam metal scene record for me was the Fireworks album by Bonfire. If you have not listened to this, Bonfire was from Germany. I think a version of the band is still around. They've been around forever. Very, very big in Europe. And they released what I think is one of the top 10. For me personally, a top 10 glam metal era album called Fireworks. And you had songs on it like American Nights. And my favorite is Fantasy. Just great. Really great. I was going to call this really great glam metal. No, really great rock and roll. Really great rock and roll of the era. Great vocals, great production, great guitar riffs, great harmonies, great choruses. Fantasy, American Nights, a couple of really great ballads. You Make Me Feel is like an iconic ballad of the era. And Fireworks by Bonfire is not easy to find on your streaming services. You kind of have to go to YouTube and hope that somebody has amassed the tracks together so you can hear them, because I don't think it's on Spotify, and I don't know why. Probably a label dispute is my guess at that. Usually is. If you're looking for something that you have not listened to, and you are a fan of rock and roll from the 80s, from that era, go listen to Fireworks by Bonfire, okay? It's a great, great record. Oh, Def Leppard released a little record called Hysteria. Perhaps you've heard of that. Dokken, Back for the Attack, which I believe had Dream Warriors on it, from the Nightmare on Elm Street, whichever that part pie, as Dennis Miller would say, whichever one that was. Dream Warriors, Dokken, Triumph released Surveillance. Motley Crue released something called Girls, Girls, Girls. Not sure if you've heard of that. We're talking peak here, man. A few episodes back, more than a few, many episodes back, I posited this question about when glam metal died, which I think was much earlier than people realize. You know, by the early 90s, iconic records are not coming out so frequently anymore, and a lot of compilations are. You know what I mean? 1987, huge genre-defining iconic records by Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Aerosmith, Anthrax released Among the Living. It was a huge, huge year for music, and, you know, that's why I think it was chosen by Steel Panther as the year to represent. I mean, the scene remained huge, 87, 88, 89, 90. It was even a big year for all you fans out there of the Christian music world. 1987 was big for you Christian rockers too. Bloodgood released Detonation, iconic white metal record, and my favorite Bloodgood album. It was a great, weird record, Bloodgood's Detonation. White Cross released their first album, the self-titled White Cross album. For those of you who are not in the know, White Cross was, particularly on that first record, white metal's answer to Ratt. Sounded like Ratt. The singer, Scott Wenzel, sounded like Stephen Pearcy. The music was not a super great produced album, but it's got its charm. Guitars sound really great, and as they should, because they were played by a cat called Rex Carroll. And Rex Carroll, among the pantheon of white metal guitarists, shredders, probably number one, probably number one historically. Really, really terrific player, like a legit player. And on every record, there would be a guitar solo, like he's doing his Eddie Van Halen thing. I once encountered Rex Carroll on the grounds of a festival I attended. I'd seen White Cross play, and then like the next day, where was it, at an amusement park? It was at Darien Lake, New York. And I'm just walking along with the boys, and I'm like 16, just a goofy kid. Rex Carroll and another member of the band walk by. And I'm like, Rex Carroll, hey man, have you got any guitar picks? Because he had been giving them out at the show, right? Got any guitar picks on you, man? And his answer to that was, no, sorry. And he walked away. Rex Carroll, everybody. White Cross, on the strength of that album and subsequent, became one of the biggest names in the Christian rock world, all right? And when you think about the secular glam metal world, you look back and the names spring to mind, okay? Poison, Cinderella, Warrant, Winger. You know the names. There's a pantheon. Well, if you flip that over to the Christian world and you say, what are the Christian glam bands from the 80s? In that pantheon is White Cross, all right? They became a big, big deal in the Christian market. And their first record is pretty cool, actually. I like their first record. Subsequent records, didn't quite do it for me, but I like that first record, and it came out in 87, man. Also, for the first time, appeared on the scene in 1987, one Ken Tamplin of Ken Tamplin's Vocal Academy, where the proof is in the singing, and you have followed his channel on YouTube, A Vocal Coach Reacts to Ken Tamplin. He appeared on the scene in 1987 for the first time with Shout. Shout released their album, It Won't Be Long, which is a straight-up hard rock album. Ken Tamplin singing and shredding on guitar. People don't realize what a killer guitarist Ken Tamplin is. Great lead player. And, hey, Shout came along too, man. So 87 was a big year in rock and roll, no matter your religious persuasion. I think the Hindu metal scene was banging in those days. The Buddhists were releasing killer records in 87. 87 was a big year, man, and so that's why I think Steel Panther harkens back to it. And it's just amazing to see how many cockles are warmed by that tune. As goofy as it is, and the lyrics are kind of hilarious, because that's Steel Panther. That's their game, man. That's what they do. But it's funny how it's just bringing up emotions for people. That is not Steel Panther's modus operandi, man. But they have hit on something here that people are really attaching to, and it's kind of funny to see, and it's a great song. This is the thing, as I've said, about Steel Panther. It's not that the lyrics are goofy and stuff that makes it work, it's that the music is so good. And the music is legit, and they're legit players, and this is a legit song. It's really cool. I will put it, of course, on the John Huff podcast referenced on the podcast playlist. I haven't added a lot of music there because I haven't done a lot of music features over the last little while. I'll put it there. I will also put, of course, Lux Eterna by Metallica. It's always a big deal still when Metallica reappears with something new. I haven't really followed Metallica for a while. I was never the hugest Metallica fan. I was always more of a Megadeth fan, to be honest. I hope that's not sacrilege. But hey, I like Metallica. I appreciate Metallica. And the new song kind of warms your cockles too, because Lux Eterna is kind of a Lux Returna, kind of a return to that 80s early Metallica sound, early Metallica vibe. It's fast, it's heavy, it's banging. Lars Ulrich, the much maligned, crushing on the double kick. There will be speculation probably as to whether he's actually playing on it. That happens all the time now, and I suspect he is. And I don't know if there's studio trickery going on. And I don't know if when they play live, there'll be some triggering going on. I want to say no. I want to say Lars can still do it. Great drum track. Great song. It's just a big, heavy, kind of thrash, 80s style, old school Metallica song. Makes me think of Motorhead. I'm not the first person to say this, but it was an independent thought of mine. Makes me think of Motorhead. It's got that kind of, in the early days, thrash and punk kind of overlapped. It was like hardcore, whatever. I think a lot of early thrash records were probably influenced by punk. So there's a punk ethos and a punk vibe to that scene all the way back to San Francisco in the early 80s. DIY, very punk ethos. And I think a lot of punk in the sound. It's just sped up. It's just faster, you know what I mean? And then they developed these chugging techniques. Metallica was pioneering in that out of the hardcore punk scene. I think it's all connected. And therefore, it's no great surprise that there's a Motorhead vibe to this tune if it's a throwback to the early days. I think it's a really good song. I think Hetfield sounds great. It's really weird. There's this kind of thing around Metallica these days. You've heard Hetfield talk about not being able, perhaps, to keep it up much longer. And, I mean, those are punishing shows. I watched the 40th anniversary. I think it was a 40th anniversary show. It's on Prime or it's on Netflix, one or the other. And it was shot in San Francisco, this concert film. And it's career spanning. You know, they begin at the beginning and they don't play every song, but they play songs from eras, different records, all the way from the beginning to now, what was now at the time. And this is demanding. This is demanding music. I mean, you watch Hetfield's hand, the strumming hand playing rhythm guitar, and it's like, man, oh man, that thing may fly off on its own at a certain point. And Kirk Hammett absolutely shredding, and that troglodyte move that Rob Trujillo does, you know, and then good old Lars. You know, people bag on Lars, but that is demanding music. And he puts full-on energy into that, even now, on like a 2-hour show, you know? There's a lot there, and it is demanding. It's demanding to play music of that intensity at that age. And so you wonder how much longer Metallica will do Metallica at the highest level. And I don't know if that induces a nostalgia or not, but watching them rock out on this tune, you know, it's like they're kids still, just banging. Lux Eterna is a cool song. Lux Eterna is, I'm going to assume it's Latin for eternal light. And there's this new record coming out that people are excited about. You know, Metallica's, people have bagged on their last few records for whatever reason, you know, the St. Anger snare drum sound. But good for Metallica, man. It's a good song. You should go check it out, you know? And there's more I could talk about today, but I'm going to cut it short because, again, this thing was supposed to have been released a couple hours ago. And I hope it's been okay. I ain't even done the freaking Patreon plug. I bought a new microphone for my iPhone, so the videos that I put on Patreon and elsewhere should sound better now. That's incentive, isn't it? There is a Patreon page for this podcast. Patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. And I've chosen Patreon because I do not want to fill this podcast with ads. I just am annoyed by ads. I don't want you to have to fast forward through them, so I have chosen Patreon as a method of supporting the show. If you are inclined to do that, it is one fee, $5 a month. You get, of course, all of these podcasts, which will remain free, and you get the videos that I'm beginning to post on Patreon. I'm trying to create exclusive content there, and I'm still working on how that goes. But really, you can just think of it as supporting, as tipping me $1.25 for the episodes I do every month. It's just a way of saying, hey, man, I see what you're doing. I appreciate what you're doing. I value what you're doing, and I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. You can find me on Instagram at John Huff Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at The John Huff Podcast. TikTok still exists, The John Huff Podcast. I don't know. I'm debating TikTok. I don't know what to do with TikTok. There's a lot here. There's a lot to be handled for a one-man operation, and there are certain things that I'm tempted to withdraw from. TikTok is one. Doing extensive show notes is another. They don't seem to have a great ROI. So I'm debating. I'm always working through how this show functions, how it can be more lean, how it can be more interesting, how it can be more useful for you. And I'm always soliciting your feedback on that. I want to know what you're interested in me talking about. I want to know what you're interested in hearing, because otherwise I'm speaking into a void, speaking into a vacuum, and I don't know if it's doing anything for you. I'd like to know. So john-huff.com/contact. You can message me there. You can message me through the various platforms. My DMs are open, man. please send along your thoughts and questions and heaps of unsolicited praise. Unless I've just solicited praise, in which case it's not unsolicited, but send it anyway, please. Warms my cockles. Share these episodes if you like them. If you think other people can get something out of just having a friendly voice in their ears once a week, or some of the more motivational stuff that I do, pass these things along. Word of mouth is still the best marketing. However, ratings and reviews help as well. So if you throw me a bone, if you're looking to buy me a Christmas present, rating and review, preferably a positive one, on your preferred platform would really, really help me, man. Trying my best to keep this thing going. And that gives me just a little impetus, gives me a little boost. I could use that from time to time, and thank you for it. Gonna go now, gonna shutting up as always. I've lost sight recently, just a little bit, of the real message of this show, which is that good things happen when you put yourself out there. COVID took the heart out of that message. COVID took the heart out of a lot of things for a lot of people. Sometimes I need to be reminded myself that good things happen when you put yourself out there. So do that, all right? 2023 is coming. Could be your year. Screw up that courage, step through the fear, and do it, man. Until then, hope you're well. Take care of yourselves and each other. And hey, I'll check you later. Yeah. Now I know I can lose as long as you follow. I'm gonna win. I'm gonna beg, steal, or borrow as long as you follow. I was gonna do all the harmonies on that. I was gonna do them all for you, kids, but I'm running late this week, so you're just gonna have to imagine them. Or better yet, go listen to the real deal. God rest ye, Christine McVie.